The following program contains explicit support for the War of Independence. If you are a pacifist, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your local Quaker.
Imagine there no juries, no courts of law to be tried, just angry mobs to punish and flog you for your crimes. Imagine all the people rioting for peace. Ooh, you may say I'm a dreamer. I know that's the point. It's just it's absurd.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. Randall Terry.
Hello, friend. I'm going to have to do it. Talk about the verdict. Yes, Zimmerman not guilty. And of course, peaceful protests and some peaceful riots breaking out in various locations in the country. We'll talk about the beauty of democracy and how it could be the death of you. But first, a word from the doctor.
We are going down a path that leads to tyranny in this country. If you want to see what tyranny looks like, then just look at the worlds that the Klingons dominate. No, you blistering idiot. The Klingons are not a real race. They're from Star Trek. Star Trek!
Welcome to the show, friend. One of the reasons that we spend so much time on this broadcast discussing theology, history, philosophy, logic, is because we as a people, as a nation, are becoming a prey, P-R-E-Y, a prey to the national media and to their ideological agenda, because they do have one. We have watched, now for several days, the aftermath of the acquittal of George Zimmerman in his self-defense shooting of Trayvon Martin. Of course, as was expected, there are many, many protests. I think that overall people are pleased at how little violence there has been. Just a few arrests in Los Angeles, some rioting in Oakland, but by and large, very large and very peaceful protests. And all of the protesters are to be commended for that. But I want to step back and just point some things out and hopefully in the process teach you to read the news, listen to the news, watch the news if you do that, with a more discerning ear, and to be able to start to ask harder questions, tougher questions about the story in question. For example, if this was a Hispanic man shooting another Hispanic man in self-defense, do you think it would have been national news? If it was a black man in Detroit shooting another black man, do you think it would have been national news? If it was a white man in Houston, Texas, shooting another white man, do you think it would have been national news? No. This was always about race. Okay? Now, there is a question, why? And before we even begin to ponder that, and I'm not certain that I have the answer, maybe it's just about ratings, we have to step back and say, yes, it's sad that this young man is dead. It really is. It's sad. It's horrible. His mother and his father have a right to grieve. They have a right to be angry. They have a right to mourn. But the people who are saying that the system failed are simply trying to further stir up racial tension. How did the system fail? The prosecution got to sign off on the jurors, okay? The prosecution helped pick 6 women as its jury, 5 of them Caucasian, 1 of them, according to media reports, is either black or Hispanic. I read that this morning from NBC. NBC could not determine if this 6th juror was Hispanic or if she was African American. But she does have 8 children of her own, okay? Her oldest is in his young 20s. So the prosecution felt that with the jury that it had, 4 of the women are mothers, that they would have that maternal instinct at work, all right, to want justice for this 17-year-old boy who was shot, fatally shot. The prosecution felt that it had its case, but it didn't. The simple fact is that when these 6 jurors, not swept up in the passion of the racial issues, not swept up in the horror of this innocent 17-year-old boy who was just walking around in a neighborhood minding his own business. When those 6 jurors had the facts presented to them, they said that Mr. Zimmerman was not guilty of murder and he was not guilty of manslaughter and was acting in self-defense. I've got to take a break. I'll be right back. Don't go away. My wife and I, for 5 years, have been grinding our own wheat and baking our own bread from scratch. Within 2 hours, you can have fresh wheat in your hand and then piping hot bread come out of the oven. The most nutritious and delicious bread you will ever have. And we do it for under $1 a loaf. Call Paula's Bread and find out about this grain mill and the mixer and how it can save you money and change your life. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. Welcome back to the program, friend. The shooting of Trayvon Martin was not about race. The acquittal of Zimmerman was not about race. And let me tell you something that is without question accurate genetically, historically, and biblically. Ready? This is a secret, a closely held secret. There's only one race, the human race. We all come from one set of parents. That's it, okay? So these distinctions that we draw, Indian, African, Caucasian, Hispanic, other, Asian, etc., all of these tones in the skin, all right? They are all because of the areas in which people lived for centuries and millennia, and they're all about who married who, but at the end of the day, we all go back to Adam and Eve. That's it. So racism, I mean, the sin of racism, of hating a people group based upon the color of their skin or the nation of their origin, is clearly unchristian. All right? It's wrong. Jesus, the Lord, the Son of God, the sacrificial lamb who died for our sins, he died for all human beings, okay? And when we all stand before the judgment seat of God, one at a time, God's not going to ask, now what race are you? It's all that we are the human race. All right, so setting that up. Number 2, I have 2 African-American children that I adopted. So, and that, by the way, enraged a lot of African Americans. There are a lot of African Americans who do not like it when non-African Americans adopt children of African American descent. So, when you look at some of these stories, you have to start to ask, who's the racist? There is a long and horrific history in this country of discrimination, brutality, crimes, sins being committed against people based upon the color of their skin. The most horrific of which, obviously, is slavery. All right? Slavery was a crime, an abominable crime against God and man. And this nation that chose to weave that crime and that sin into the very fabric of the U.S. Constitution, this nation has paid a horrific toll for that sin, for that abominable crime. And after slavery was ended, we all can study the history. There is no question that Jim Crow laws, discrimination, the creation of ghettos, there's so much wickedness and evil that continued for generations that was just a crime against people of African American descent. Now we can see it to a much less degree, but there is some discrimination against Hispanics. But friends, please hear me. The numbers are in. Within a generation, the majority of America will not be Caucasian, okay? The majority of Americans will not have this skin tone, this fine mix of Italian, English, Irish, Scottish, a little bit of Iroquois Indian, and I don't even know what else, okay? Most Americans won't look like this. So what? What matters are people's ethics, their behavior, their love of liberty, their love of justice, whether or not they fear God, whether or not they want to build this republic on the 10 commandments or on the 10 demands of the Communist Marxist Manifesto, Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. What matters at the end of the day is whether or not somebody can defend themselves without fear because of who they're defending themselves against. So if George Zimmerman, who appears to be of some Hispanic descent, I don't know, I can't tell, but if he defends himself against another person of Hispanic descent, is he thinking, I'll be okay with this one, but these people are an untouchable class by virtue of their race? Do we want that? Do we want to live in fear of any race? African Americans don't want to live in fear of white oppression, but I promise you this, every skin tone group in America does not want to live in fear of any skin tone in America. We have to understand that what matters is that people do what's right. Love your neighbor as yourself. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the readings from yesterday's church services all over the country. If you went to church and you heard the gospel reading, you might have heard the parable of the Good Samaritan. I'll be right back. Do you want to have knowledge, wisdom, discernment? If so, you have to read good books on theology, history, books that look at the lives of great men and women. So to help you to become a more effective Christian, a better witness for truth, somebody who can engage in productive conversation that exhorts and edifies those that you speak with, we're going to do something crazy. We're offering you these 7 books for a gift of any size. You just pay for the shipping and handling, and then give whatever gift that you can, and we will send them to you. But just to make it a little bit more crazy, I will send you a second copy of my 3 books, autographed. You can give them as a gift to your pastor or to a family member and help extend truth and justice in the world. This is while supplies last. Welcome back, friend. I guess this is as good a time as any to ferret out in all of our hearts if we are struggling with race and justifying ourselves. Hear me out, because I want to talk both ethically and then statistically, and bring Jesse Jackson into the mix, which will be fun. I am somebody. All right. The Pharisee, the scholar of the law, said to Jesus, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, how do you read the law? He said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, well, then do it. But the man, willing to justify himself, his conscience started to bother him, said, well, who is my neighbor? In other words, well, you don't mean I have to love everybody. I just have to love fellow Jews, right? The people in my neighborhood, the people that are like me. Jesus went on to talk about the man who was on the road to Jericho, was beaten and left for dead. We don't know anything about that victim. What we do know is that the priest and the Levite walked by on the other side of the road. That the priest and the Levite, who were busy about God's work, that they did not save the man. What we do know is that a Samaritan, a person who was despised by the Jews hated Samaritans more than they hated Gentiles, because the Samaritans had corrupted their Jewish bloodline as well as the worship of the one true God. Okay? So for Jesus to make the hero of the story a Samaritan would be like a member of the Ku Klux Klan asking Christ, who's my neighbor? And then Jesus making an African American man the hero of the story. Okay? I'm just talking about the visceral, emotional reaction to the person who Jesus takes to be the hero. Or somebody who is a diehard Southern Baptist and then saying that the hero of the story is a homosexual, transgender Jehovah's Witness. That's who came and saved the man. So Jesus tells the story, and then he said, which one do you think loved the man like a neighbor? And the scholar said, the one who showed mercy to him. Okay? We as Christians are called upon to love our neighbor as ourselves, and our neighbor is any other human being made in the image of God. The end. All right? And if your neighbor's life is in jeopardy, such as the man lying in the ditch, to love your neighbor as yourself means that you should try and protect him, defend him, save him, regardless of what race the dude in the ditch is. And I say race again in quotes. If you're watching your TV and you are happy for the racial tension, you know all them African Americans, you know how they are, then there's something wrong in your heart. There is. If you're African American and you're watching the news and saying, white people are all bad, and they're always down on the black man, they're always trying to hold him down, there's something wrong with you. I mean, do I have to point out the obvious? African Americans don't ride on the back of the bus. They ride all the way to the White House in a limousine. Okay? So I understand that there are pockets of resistance where there are still people who have stuff in their heart that they're struggling with. But the idea that this nation is somehow a racist nation and the system favors white people over black people is lunacy, okay? It's lunacy. Well, you don't know what it's like to be a black man walking down the street. Well, Jesse Jackson said something about that. I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, I'll quote Jesse Jackson from a few years back where he made press. And I can't figure out how racist it was. Can a black man say something about other black men and have it be racist? How would you like to be able to reach hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of potential customers with your product or your company or your web-based business? Well, you can do that right here on this show. Every single day, we get phone calls or letters or orders online from states all over the country where people are watching this television show. Right now, we are seen in 45 cities at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time every night, and then a rerun again at 12:30 midnight. You can reach them using this show at advertising rates that are so inexpensive, it would blow your mind. So, if you're interested, contact us at the phone number that you see on the screen or the email address, and we can talk about how you can grow your business and help support this show. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It wouldn't be the voice of resistance if I didn't at least stir up a little bit of thought and perhaps some controversy. Not for controversy's sake, mind you, but to at least put ideas on the table that have to be thought about. Jesse Jackson said a few years ago, and I quote, "There is nothing more painful to me than to walk down the street and hear footsteps and start thinking about robbery, then look around and see somebody white and feel relieved." He said it's painful for him. He's walking down the streets of D.C. and hears footsteps and he thinks, am I going to get robbed? He looks around and sees a white person and he's relieved. During the break, I was looking at a Baltimore Sun article that said young black men from ages 20 to 29, over 50% of the African-American men in the city of Baltimore are either in jail, in prison, on parole, on probation, under some type of legal supervision. Over half of young men from 20 to 29. A statistic that's a few years old, I imagine that it's worse now, is that about 1 in 3 black men in their 20s, nationwide statistic, are either in jail, on parole, in prison, on probation. That figure was from the mid-90s, okay? Maybe it's less now. Another figure I saw was 25%, 1 in 4. So here's the problem. When you have a civil rights leader like Jesse Jackson saying he's relieved when he hears footsteps and he looks around and sees, oh, it's a white person, he's acknowledging what the statistics show nationwide, what the statistics show from Baltimore, that there is a statistical overpreponderance. What's the word I'm looking for? There's a higher percentage of young African American men committing crimes than of other skin tones. Now, in the waning moments of this program, I believe that is directly related to the welfare state. The statistics are that these men are also fatherless. And the welfare state created an entire generation of young people, babies born out of wedlock, because it was economically more advantageous for these single moms to have babies and not get married. And so what happens to fatherless children? Take a look at the stats and then hear the voice of Jesse Jackson. Oh, you're white. I'm so relieved to see you.